The Fujifilm 70-300mm lens, released earlier this year, is not a lens that would cater to my shooting style and subject matter. Quite simply, I am not the target customer for this product, but what if I took this lens, injected it into my workflow for a few weeks, and produced a review to share some of my honest thoughts? Why not? Besides, if there's anything I learned this last year is that no matter what you do, you're always gonna disappoint somebody. Sorry, Mom.
But God might be on vacation, and the promised land ain't never promised. My baby telling me to be patient, but the devil always working overnight, my darling.
The Fujifilm 70-300mm is an incredibly versatile lens that comes in a very discreet package, and I mentioned this before, at 600 grams and the size of a tall boy. It's kind of crazy to think that you're getting roughly 107 to 457 in terms of the equivalent focal range in something, again, this compact. What makes this lens even more attractive is that you have weather sealing and optical image stabilization built in. For people that shoot wildlife, birds, or sports, this is such a compelling offer, especially at $800 US. Now, I don't shoot any of those things for a living, and I really want to set up a unique production, but because of the gross incompetencies at my local government, I'm prevented from me actually going outside much and doing my normal setup. So it is a bit of a square peg, round hole situation, but I think I'll just try to bring some valuable conclusions for this review that should give you enough information to make an accurate buying decision. In other words, I'm gonna do this my way, and I'm probably gonna disappoint some khaki wearing bird photographers. Yeah. Back to the build of this lens. It feels great. It doesn't feel like a cheap product you'd get from a third party, and the inclusion of a locking mechanism on the wide range is a nice touch. You can quickly disengage this lock with enough force and move through the focal range if you need to. And that's something that shooters in a dynamic environment may appreciate. My first real test with this lens was using it to capture some B-roll of products. While not a macro lens, I thought that why not try to use this to capture some close-ups at a distance? It actually worked surprisingly well. Now, it was a bit tricky given even the smallest movements would produce a little bit of jitters, and the OIS of this lens would counteract some intentional movements, but overall, the experience was not poor by any means. In fact, this led me to passing the 70-300 lens over to my assistants when I'm capturing images for behind the scenes footage, and the sentiment was even better from them. In well-lit environments, the wide focal range of this product produced some really interesting shots and even allowed my team to be even more out of the way. It's not something I'd say is a must-have for a video workflow, but I won't deny that it proved to be incredibly useful in several situations. In any case, this is still more of a photography lens, so let's talk more about that. There is a pretty noticeable delta when it comes to the image quality of the 70-300mm lens. And what I mean by that is under the right circumstances, it performs like a top-tier product. But if it moves outside of its comfort zone, you start to see some holes. Shooting portrait work wide open, I'd noticed that the contrast in bokeh and overall feel of the image seemed a bit lacking. The out of focus areas don't seem as clean as you'd get on the prime solutions from Fujifilm, and it didn't instill that confidence that you'd normally have. That being said, when I cranked up the light and moved to off-camera strobes, I can narrow the aperture to f8, for example, and get much better results. Here's the thing, I understand that this is going to be less of an issue for people that are actually the target customer for this lens. When you're shooting birds and you have a bright blue sky in the background, or puffy clouds, or
maybe there's a happy tree
in the background, these aren't things that have a bright glow to them or need to be perfectly circular. Further, the texture and feel of nature, landscapes, and even some sports might cater better to the image quality produced on this lens. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the shortcomings I experienced occurred in an environment where this lens really wasn't meant to excel. Some people may use that to knock this lens, but I think that it's incredibly short-sighted. This is a specialty offering and should be treated as such. If your work or hobby takes you outdoors a lot, where your subject matter is often a different species than yourself, I think you'll have a fantastic time with the 70-300mm lens. Now, With that said, are there places where this lens can get better? I don't know if this is entirely possible to fix on the Fujifilm side, but I felt like the contrast of this lens was a bit too punchy. Now, this could entirely be my taste, but the nice thing is that you don't have to wait for Fujifilm to fix this. You can edit your images in post, obviously, and even adjust the tone curve in camera to correct the output of your JPEG file. So while this isn't a major issue, in my opinion, just a preference thing really more than anything. The optical image stabilization is really good for photography, and I know I'm gonna sound like a pain in the ass at this point, but I'd like to see some tweaks made to address how it performs in video. I know I'm in the incredible minority here, but it would be nice to improve the algorithm so you get a little bit less jitters and counteraction as you make intentional movements of this camera. And to be honest, you should have this off when you're doing video, but again, I'd like to see some improvements here. Lastly, and this may be just me, I would have liked to see a lens that can lock at any focal range, even if it was just a little bit more resistance. Look, I never experienced any zoom creep from this lens during my testing, and this recommendation, again, may just be me, but it would be pretty f***ing awesome to lock in at 150 or 200 while you're in the field and not worry about shifting your composition when a bird comes into frame. In any case, let me know if these improvements are things that are worthwhile or if I'm just talking out of my ass at this point. So where have I landed with the Fujifilm 70-300mm F4.0-5.6 WR-OIS lens? I think the nicest thing I could say, and this is entirely true, is that this lens performs very well that even for creatives outside of the target audience might find some value in. I found myself pushing against its limitations and managed to still get great material. And here's the thing, for those that are into nature, wildlife, birds, sports, nature, well, you just have a feature-rich lens on the X mount that now feels like a steal. To be able to get this kind of quality and versatility at $800 is an incredible value that you'll see in your workflow. And if you're on the fence of this lens, I would say look at what you shoot and what your light situation is often like in your environment. Those two will give you a very clear answer as to whether this lens is right for you. And for those of you that don't really shoot any of those items that I just mentioned, well, this lens was never meant for us to begin with. And there you have it. That is the full review of this lens. I hope you enjoyed that, but more importantly, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, my name's Gajan. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.